Welcome to this Global Network webinar, and my name is Yuxi Zhang, and I will be moderating this webinar today together with my colleagues Alexander Loschke and Sean Laval. During today's webinar, we are happy to have Mr. Matthew Shearing from International Statistical Institute, we call ISI, who will be presenting ongoing capacity building initiatives from the ISI. So Mr. Shearing's presentation today will focus on how statisticians and institutions from across different sectors in society can best support each other based on our shared passion for the potential of statistical science to lead a better world. From this webinar, you can better understand the ISI and its association, such as International Association of Official Statistics, and the benefits of membership. So let me now tell you a bit more about our speaker. So Mr. Matthew Shearing is an elected member of the International Statistical Institute and co-chair of its Capacity Building Committee. Matthew is a consultant on capacity building for the UN, World Bank, and other institutions, and has over 20 years of experience across the globe in developing official statistics and improving the management and the impact of data in decision-making more widely. He is a co-founder of the NIRAS Digital Futures Hub and of the Online Privacy Foundation. A couple of practical things. We will first hear the presentations of our speaker and then have a Q&A session at the end. And please feel free to write comments and questions into the meeting chat anytime. And during the Q&A session, please ask the question yourself, or if you wish, we can also ask the question for you. So just let us know. As always, this Global Network webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the Global Network of Data Officers and the Statistician at yammer.com/unstats. We invite you to continue the discussions on the Global Network after the webinar. Now I would like to pass the floor to our speaker. Over to you, Matthew. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Yuxi. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
That's fantastic. Thank you for the introduction, and hello to everybody online. Actually, I should start by asking a question about why am I here? And if you can answer the question, why am I here speaking to you by the end of this presentation, then I think that would be a success, because in that answer, I think, is what we want to achieve today. Part of the answer is why are we here? Because I became co-chair of the Capacity Building Committee in the ISI last year, along with Oliver Chinganya, who's the director of UN Statistics in Africa. So we're kind of new to this, in a sense, about thinking about, well, what can the ISI do for capacity building, and also thinking about, well, what is the ISI? What does it do? Why is it here? And why is it important? All these questions are related. And you may have seen earlier Conchita Kleweg there, who is the new ISI director, who started this year. So we're kind of in a position as an organization where we have a kind of an opportunity to kind of take stock of where we are and what we should be doing in the future. And it's also really important to think about coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, when face-to-face meetings stopped essentially, and we learned a lot about what we can and can't do with virtual interactions. And one of the key things about the ISI, which we'll talk about today, is that it's a network. So the key question is, well, how can we best use that network, and how do we best do it? Particularly coming out of the COVID-19 situation. But of course, the bigger picture is we're all statisticians and data scientists thinking about, well, how do we do with this new emerging data ecosystem, which actually isn't so new now. But it's a key question really to think, well, how can the ISI help us to kind of navigate that new ecosystem and support statisticians and data scientists in doing well in this new kind of environment that we're working with. So I'll just briefly talk about the plan for the webinar. And I think it's important to just get you thinking about what's coming next, because it'd be really helpful if it's not just a presentation and me talking to you. It would be great to get your ideas, your views to feed into this kind of stock take that we're having in the ISI at the moment. And so we'll spend the first section talking about what the ISI is. I think some of you will probably be members, some of you won't, some of you will know what it is and what it's for. And some of you won't, but actually your ideas about what it's for is actually as useful as mine, or Conchita is also here in the room with us. So we'll look a bit about an introduction to the ISI, and the ISI it's not just an organization, it's a family of organizations, of associations, which one of them is the International Association of Official Statistics, the IOS, which you may be more familiar with than the other associations. And we'll look at really what the ISI has been doing and still doing to support statisticians. And also look at what are the benefits of membership. And also I think it's important to look at the patterns of membership. So who's in the organization and what direction are the numbers going in, these kind of things. And that will help us, I think, later when we think about the right role for the ISI in capacity building. I then want to kind of just stop and see if you've got any questions or points to make. Please do put comments, questions in the chat box, and my colleague Yushi there and other colleagues will be facilitating that. And I just want to pause a little while to kind of look at some of those comments if you have them, and maybe have a little discussion. And then the second section, once we all understand what the ISI is, we can perhaps then have a good conversation about, well, what should it be doing in terms of global capacity building in statistics? And it's going to be really important, I think, to think about, well, what is it that's missing? So a lot of us will be involved in or be beneficiaries of or be organizing, doing capacity building, modernizing statistical systems. So what is it in terms of particularly kind of international organizations? What is it that we're not doing so well, and how can the ISI help? One of the key things that we don't want to do as an organization is do things which other people are doing. We want to make sure that we are adding value and finding the right niche and generating resources rather than competing for them. So these are kind of key issues to think about as we go through today's webinar. And we'll talk a little bit in the end about how you could possibly get involved in all of this. And one thing to underline is that one of the key elements of the organization is it's nearly completely voluntary. So the ISI has a permanent office which is based supported by the CBS Netherlands in The Hague, a small team of staff that have to kind of facilitate this organization and a whole heap of ambition. So if we have ambitions for the ISI, we have to be realistic about how we can use resources, because our main resource, if you like, is our volunteering and our passion for statistics. It's a professional association, so we have to think about how we can motivate and mobilize people, most importantly. So a quick introduction to what the ISI is, but before we do that, when we pause after this section, I'd really like you to be thinking about these questions. Hopefully we can clarify these at the end of the kind of discussion session after this first section. So what is it that I haven't said that you would like to know that someone can help you find out? What are the benefits that you think the ISI brings, maybe if I haven't mentioned them? And what can the ISI do differently to help you and your organization to kind of improve the impact of statistics? And I think like a side question here is for you to think about, if you're not a member, why is it you're not a member? And I don't mean that in an accusative way. It's more like it'd be really helpful to us to understand what's stopping you from buying into a membership fee in the ISI. Probably the first answer is the money, but the second answer is then, well, how can we make that value for money for you? So please bear that in mind and do chat away, and do feel brave enough to come and speak to us during the discussion break. So in terms of the ISI family, so I mean, it's large. We have over 4,500 members from over 100 countries, so that's quite big. And it's quite a wide range geographically we've got. So we've got this tremendous potential in our basic kind of makeup. And the mission there is to promote the understanding, development of good practice of statistics worldwide, by providing the core global network for statistics. So we're a network first and foremost, and that's a really important thing. And I think the worldwide part of this is a really important thing to think about, and the word statistics. So most of you, I think, are probably official statisticians or involved in official statistics, but that is only one part of what statistics is. So you have a wellspring of like-minded, professionally relevant people across the globe that are not in official statistics. That a large part of the members of these other associations are in academia, but some of them are in business and other walks of life. So when we start thinking about official statistics in the modern data ecosystem, actually this family becomes even more valuable. And when we look at some of these organizations, a lot of them have in-depth knowledge of things which official statisticians need in their day-to-day life, sample surveys and censuses, mathematical statistics, that's the heart of what we're doing, and so forth. But some of them also have things which are highly relevant to the new data ecosystem. So the IASC focus on statistical computing, which is even more important in the data science era. The IASE looks at statistical education. So we know that we need to kind of better ourselves and leverage statistical literacy across our societies if we're going to face some of the existential threats which official statistics are in. And also these kind of organizations will benefit from the kind of the perspectives that we have in official statistics, particularly links to governments, links to funding, these kind of things. So there are lots of kind of mutual benefits to think about when we look at this. And more, I think we need to be thinking in official statistics about having kind of an outward network that looks beyond the borders of our, not just our NSO towards national statistical systems, but also to wider society. And I think that this family provides a good route to that via people that have a like-minded and are passionate about the impact of statistics for public good. So we think about, well, what's the core essence of what we are, and what characterizes our family. And I do think it's more like a family than an organization, in a sense that, you know, we're here to look after each other because we share professional views, perspectives, and passion for what we do. And one of the most important things is that we are members as professionals, individual people or individual organizations. But mostly we are individual members as people, and we're not member states. There are no states which are members of this organization. There are no governments which are members of this organization. There may be national statistical offices which are, but essentially when we're interacting in this family, there are no vested interests in terms of this classic sense which you may get when you work in organizations which are governmental or intergovernmental. And I think that's a real bonus. That's a real unique space that we can utilize. And when I'm going to introduce this idea of capacity building now, and I don't really want to get distracted by what capacity building is in this webinar, as opposed to capacity development or something. But I think that, and we'll look in a moment at what the ISI does, we can think about in a broad sense that everything that it does, it supports our members in building their capacity for your careers to be better and for you to have a bigger impact. But what the capacity building strategy we'll think about later is about, I think he's thinking more kind of intensely about how do we focus that on the impact of institutions in official statistics. And we are a network. We are a network within the IOS, and we're also between the IOS and the other associations and the ISI larger family, but also beyond our associations. So that's really important. I mentioned it before. And we are our core resource. I've said it before and I'll say it again. This is about people, and it's about our passion, about mobilizing ourselves based on a more or less volunteering basis. And we really have to think about how far we can go with that. And I mean, related to that, there's an apology to make because I haven't had a lot of time to prepare this presentation because I'm doing it voluntarily on the top of everything else that I'm doing professionally that I'm being paid for. So what's motivating me and what might motivate you to do these kind of things, I'll leave that till the end, but answering that question again, I think is a really important thing to think about. So what is it that ISI does? How does it support or build the capacity of statisticians? So one of the most important things is around ethical issues. And we've seen, and even just this week, I think, the ISI Advisory Board on Ethics released a statement about El Salvador, considering that there are lots of changes going on with the structure of their national statistical system, which from a professional point of view carries lots of risks to scientific independence, not least. But there have been other examples. So we had a case in Fiji last year where the national statistician was fired because he produced some statistics which the government didn't like. And the ISI, because it's not a government, has that kind of ability to kind of make comments on that and provide support not just to the people who are affected by these political things, but also support to the fundamental principles of official statistics in a way that isn't necessarily possible at the United Nations. Apologies to my other colleagues there, but I've been in United Nations meetings which have been very tricky to handle, dealing with political cases, which are not so difficult to navigate and from the ISI's perspective. There's also a plethora, a whole load of short courses and webinars which are being run by the ISI on a regular basis that you can benefit from as members. We also have a series of journals associated with the associations, not least the Statistical Journal of the IOS, which has a lot of forward-thinking, state-of-the-art for new thinking in official statistics, which really helps to build capacity. But also, I think in our professional family, people providing papers for such journals actually really helps us to develop our skills in communicating and thinking about issues from a methodical point of view. There's lots of special events we run to kind of support things like leadership, but lots of other things. And a question which will come up later is, well, okay, a lot of other organizations do that kind of thing. So what can we do that's different, that adds value? We also have kind of dedicated support groups, if you like, for sections of our family. So we have a special interest group on data science. We have a young statisticians group, women in statistics, which can provide that kind of professional focus rather than kind of governmental focus and look at things from a different angle. I also don't want to get in today to talk about, well, if it's the ISI, shouldn't it be the ISI and data science, the International Statistical Institute, and for data science? These are big questions which I don't think we've quite answered yet as an organization about whether, you know, we need to fully integrate data scientists or recognize them as a separate part of the organization. But let's not get into that. And then one of the key things is the network. And I think what people have, and myself, have found most beneficial about the ISI have been conferences. We have the World Statistics Congress, which happens biennially, and we even had one remotely during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have the 2023 World Statistics Congress coming up in July next year in Canada. There's been a lot of regional conferences. So the ISI running regional conferences, often alongside IOS in the regions, and we've got one coming up in Zambia in Africa next April. But I think there's still a lot of unused potential in those conferences, particularly as those conferences again bring us together in this professional, non-governmental way. And also, I think when we think about capacity building, that's kind of a key way we can do that, the network, people coming together, talking face to face, but also how do we, in between those conferences, how do we maintain those networks? How do we really keep things going? And I think that's key questions for the future. So membership, if you were a member of the ISI, what does it give you? So it is an opportunity to be recognized. So the more you get involved in the ISI or the associations, the bigger your network becomes, the more recognized your name becomes, which is very important for careers, let's be honest. But also if you work within the ISI and the statistical community, you can become elected, which is a recognition of your efforts, and that's also good for your career, but it's also good for morale. It definitely was in my case. So it's also part of this network. So this you can, as part of this family, you're connected to professional societies and individuals all over the world, and you can use those networks for exploring new ideas. Whether we need to do that better, I think we probably can, and your ideas for us doing that better would be great. Once you're a member, you can also get involved in one of the committees, like the one that Oliver and I are chairing around the capacity building, or there are dozens of interest groups and other kind of groups to be involved in, which can really help you kind of learn from other people, learn about what's going on in the world from a professional perspective. As a member, you also get a range of discounts on things like association memberships, access to journals, these kind of things, and even the RSS magazine Significance, which is a really good one. And one of the key things, and we'll see this later when we talk about membership patterns, that one of the key things is that you get discount rates for participation in the conferences. And actually what happens is most people join to get that discounted rate on the conferences, but I think that what we want to do is get people to join because it means more than just some money off a registration for one of these really important conferences. So a quick look at what's happening with membership. So individual members, you see that cycle there where every 2 years membership shoots up because of the conference, and then membership wanes in between. But you see during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was quite a significant reduction, which is building up, and hopefully will build up more towards next year's World Statistics Congress. But the worry is that I think that we've lost some core elements of that during COVID-19. So what is it that we can do to really get that back up? Because I think membership, the numbers of members and the diversity of members, is a really important kind of resource that we have to really enhance our impact in capacity building. You look at the association membership there, there's also been a downward trend since COVID. But you'll see there the iOS actually going up and up and up. Now, what the iOS has been doing, which is probably possibly part of the answer to how we can improve on capacity building, iOS has found ways to support people getting membership, sponsored membership, so free membership or sponsored membership, which has been really important, I think, to keeping the iOS going and vibrant as an organization. When we look at diversity, and this is, I think this is really important because it's not just important for its own sake, it's also important because it really adds value to what the organization can offer people from different groups and people from the same groups in our kind of complex world that we live in. You're all statisticians, so you can kind of infer from those charts what you want. Some of the key messages for me are that it's a very male organization, so it's dominated by males. Almost 70% of the membership is male, which may say something about, I think, maybe the professional structure in academia, which needs to be addressed from their side. But also, I think, maybe there's something there about what's happening in official statistics, and hopefully it's less so. There's more women coming into senior management positions. The reason why I'm saying that as well, because a lot of people in the organization are, let's say, senior, not old, but a lot of people are retired, so they find time to be more involved in the ISI when they're retired from their normal working life, and so that's great because they have a lot of knowledge which they can give to other members. But the key question is, how do we address that balance and get more young and junior statisticians involved in the organizations and helping each other? You can see also that there's a worry when we talk about capacity building, which we want to focus on the developing world. We can see that the proportion of members from developing world countries has gone down, and again there was an impact from the COVID-19 pandemic. The ISI membership by continent there is slightly skewed by population numbers, but I think even so, we can see that there's a domination, I think, from the Western world, North America and Europe. There's a worrying trend in Asia, especially given the population of the downward slope there after 2020, and set therefore in Africa as well. But you see Africa and Latin America, where there are persistent problems in official statistics in particular. That's a bit of a worry if we want to really get some impact with capacity building. Right, so that's my general introduction. So what else would you like to know? What are the benefits you think the ISI brings, which I haven't mentioned? And what do you think the ISI can do differently to help you in a general sense? Maybe Yuxi, I can hand it over to you for a discussion.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your really great introduction to the ISI. And I don't see any question being posted in the chat, but maybe during this time, I see Ms. Conchita is also here. Maybe I can give the floor to Ms. Conchita Greenweg, the director of ISI, for any additional information about the ISI and maybe its membership. Its membership or benefits, because I also see some question being posted in our registration form regarding how to join the ISI and also the benefit of the membership. So please go ahead, Ms. Conchita, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Yuxi. Well, there's maybe not a lot to add after this enthusiastic speech of Matthew with a lot of information. I think one thing I would like to stress is I started at the 1st of July. So I've been involved in the ISI now for more than 2.5 months. And what struck me is really the drive to share the knowledge we have in our network and make it available for everybody who is interested in statistics, and not only official statistics or in the research area, but also maybe in private companies or and that's in this, well, specifically in this case, very interesting, in the lower and middle income countries. And what we have been thinking of as ISI, we learned from COVID. So it did bring us a lot of sorrow and mess, but it also made us learn different types to communicate with our members. And we organized now online courses in springtime and in autumn to share the knowledge we have. We are now looking for and already have a sort of list with well-known people from over the world who are willing to share in webinars and specific online courses their knowledge with others who may not be able to attend the World Statistics Congress, but are able to join short courses, especially also for younger people who are in the start of their career or maybe mid-career. It's very interesting to learn about these these online courses. I do see a question here. Have you already prepared a program for the Ottawa meetings? And do you still accept abstracts? I can't see everything. What should you advise the young? Well, the IPS submission is has now ended. The CPSs are going to open. I think it's going to be the 1st of October. And it's also interesting for poster sessions. So yes, that is interesting for young statisticians because they are able to share the results of their research or what they are doing. And I'm also now thinking of a way to involve more young statisticians. For example, I don't know if I have the time, otherwise I'll just keep chatting on for on and on. But just one brief thing. I was chatting with the official statistic bureau here in the Netherlands to ask them, please do not only send delegates at a sort of 40, 50 plus, but please select maybe 2 out of 10 young people, early career, mid-career, and give them the opportunity also network and in person. And so that's going to be one of the requests from me to our institutional members or other organizations. Please think, not only look at ISI to be a sort of inclusive, but also send delegates and be inclusive in that way. So I think capacity building is about thinking of a lot of ideas and maybe solutions to try and get involved as many people as possible and share our knowledge we have in this really tremendous network. I see what would be the main points in abstract preparation? I'm not going to use this this session to answer these questions. If you do have questions, please send your email. I think our emails, Matthews, are at the end of the presentation. Yeah. So you can, if you do have questions, please put them there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much. I think that this is definitely some valuable additional information about ISI, and also especially for young statisticians, I think it's also a great opportunity for them to network, and I fully support that decision. And now maybe I can just pass the floor again to Matthew for his second session of the presentation. Matthew, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Yushi. Moving on from that, so now we understand a little bit about the organization, which is the ISI, and some of the questions about what the ISI is and should be. Really like to talk to you now about what we're thinking about in terms of how the ISI can fit into global efforts to support capacity building, particularly in official statistics. Again, there's a few questions to bear in mind that hopefully we can chat about at the end, but also to help you thinking about what I'm talking about. I think we need to really be honest about what the persistent challenges are in capacity building. I worked in capacity building now for quite a long time, over 10 years, and I see some persistent problems that we've not actually solved, and some gaps that are emerging where we need to address. And okay, so how can the ISI best help that, given what you know about it? What's our role to play, and how can we do it? Particularly, we don't have much resources. We do hope to put forward bidding for funding from those areas where we're not competing with other organisations that may be doing this. So we're in a kind of a place now where we're developing a business case for what could be funded under the ISI umbrella, but we're realistic that we may not get a lot, so we have to think about what can we do without money, and you could be helping with that. But first and foremost, let's take a step back and think about, well, okay, what's this new data ecosystem? What are kind of the implications? We know this digitization or digitalization of the kind of statistical environment is very important. After we know that digital skills and talking to kind of professionals who are digitally savvy and working with those kind of organizations is going to be really important. So how can the ISI help that? We know there are persistent data gaps. How can we leverage the knowledge, the huge amount of knowledge we have across the globe in official statistics, in research, in academia, in business, to help fill those gaps? And the ISI can maybe help in that. And we also know that we need to think about and be more kind of expansive in the way that we think about official statistics more generally. We need this broader data community. This kind of goes back to this issue about should it be ISI or ISDCI involving data science as well. But still the ISI could play a central role actually in kind of helping to bring professionals together to understand the linkages, these kind of things. We also need, as I mentioned before, the ways that we do things are changing, and the ISI has to kind of adapt to that as well. So this kind of the phys digital, combining the virtual and the real in effective ways, not just notional ways. And I think we need to think long and hard about the World Statistics Congress and how we don't make sure we don't alienate those parts of the world which are a long way away from Canada. But that's happened in other times when we've had conferences in Asia when North America has been isolated. So how do we really get through that? Your idea is very much welcome. And we know there are a whole heap of challenges around evidence-based decision making, and we know that academics and research, they've got a lot of experience in this, which can help official statisticians. So that's the kind of context. And if you want my opinion on what I think those persistent challenges are in capacity building, my ideas are on the screen there. I think the first three are kind of related. I think there's too much competition, there's not enough efficiency, and there's lack of coordination between international organizations, regional, sub-regional organizations that are doing these things. And I think they would admit that themselves, but we haven't yet found a way to solve this problem in an effective way. Question would be, well, can the ISI therefore play a kind of neutral arbiter role in helping with that, which might not take too much resource to do, but just use our motivation for doing so. But also we need to make sure that whatever the ISI does in general doesn't add to that kind of problem. I don't think capacity building looks outward enough. I think it's beginning to do so. So this is in the sense that I think capacity building in official statistics is often official statisticians talking to official statisticians, which is great. But we know that there is more knowledge, there is more help out there available from other walks of society, but outside of those traditional boundaries, and they haven't necessarily been well integrated into capacity building activities. And what the ISI can perhaps do is build links to other statisticians, but also those other statisticians. So academics will have links to research organizations, will have links to businesses, which official statisticians don't have. So how can we kind of use that network to help official statistics learn outwards? We also know that capacity building, I think, needs to be more sustainable. Part of sustainability is targeting and tailoring. I think there's been in the past too much kind of scattergun approach. This making something available to all countries at once isn't necessarily that efficient or sustainable. When we think about sustainability, we need to do more peer-to-peer learning, more south-to-south learning, and build capability from the inside. And hopefully, if we design the ISI capacity building program well, then we can help solve some of these problems. So one of the things that are kind of in our minds in the ISI around, what kind of framework should we use when deciding what the ISI can do in terms of capacity building? These are some of the key issues. So learning across the boundaries I've talked about. We know that there's statistical literacy. There's a lot of expertise in that around the ISI family, and we know that scientific independence is at the heart of the academic process and the research process. So maybe that's something we can do knowledge transfer between official statistics and others. We know that data communities need to be more expansive, and the ISI can be at the heart of that. We know that we perhaps need to increase membership and the diversity of membership to enhance our impact in basic capacity building activities. We're kind of thinking through this idea, well, what kind of regional focus do we need without being too regional? So how can we get this balance between ensuring that learning is geographically relevant, capacity building is geographically relevant, but also to make sure that it doesn't happen in a box, and that kind of regional networking and learning can be leveraged back into the global sphere. Particular focus on diversity in developing countries where the capacity building is most needed. And thinking about this, maybe coordinating and mobilizing resources. So we need to make sure that whatever we do is coordinated with the kind of global statistical capacity building landscape, and how can we add to the resources there rather than compete for them. So these are the key things that we're kind of grappling with at the moment. And where we are at the moment is we're kind of looking at kind of 5 areas where we're focusing the committee's attention. So the capacity building committee has around 15 members who are all esteemed, well-experienced professionals. And we're organising task teams around these 5 things on the screen. So we're looking at seeing what value can be driven from regional networks in the Middle East and North Africa region, in the Latin American region. And I think in Latin America, there's a particular need to make sure that learning and capacity building is delivered in Spanish and Portuguese, which the rest of the world is kind of dominated, I think, by English and sometimes French-driven capacity building, so they can sometimes be excluded. There's scope to look at the Pacific and other parts of Asia, which we might look at in the future. We really want to also, I mean, we are a statistical society, a professional society of statisticians. So how can we help those professional societies develop at the kind of national levels or regional levels? We know these kind of organizations play a really important role. You look at organisations like the Royal Statistical Society that's based in the UK. They played a really strong role, I think, in supporting official statistics, being a critical friend, but also producing training that's relevant, that's objective, that is scientifically based, and provide a real support to the official statistical system. And I think more and more so in developing countries, that could be a really important partner. And we could use our experience to kind of help those developing countries to have this kind of external support network to help the general transformation and modernization of statistics and deal with some of the normal problems. We're looking at how best to set up mentorship. So how do we kind of drain the brains, if you like, of our knowledgeable senior members? how do we get the ideas and the enthusiasm from younger and more junior members to influence what senior members are thinking? How do we best kind of join up these networks across boundaries? These are kind of really important questions that we've got a task team looking at. We're setting up a task team in Latin America to look at kind of sustainable human resource strategies that look at how academia and the government statistic organizations can work together in a particular regional context. And within all these and separately, we're also trying to think about, well, how do we make sure that the World Statistics Congress next year builds capacity in itself, is a capacity building event. So it's, you know, it's not just people sitting around drinking tea and coffee and other things. It's something which has a sustainable impact, a long-term impact, and we can feed in the needs of particularly developing countries and younger and the diverse voices across global statistics into that conference. So how do you get involved? And here are some of the email addresses that you will need to kind of find out more information. So you can sign up for membership on the ISI website there. You can put your hand up and volunteer if you're interested in some of those areas I've just talked about. The capacity building committee would be very interested in you coming and helping, which could be really good for your professional knowledge development, your network development, and your career. You could come back to us and propose something that I haven't proposed there. This is all kind of flexible. Anything that works and adds value is kind of what we're looking for. Any ideas? Let's have them. We are a bottom-up organization to a large extent. So your ideas, your energy will drive this. And also, if you know about kind of funding opportunities that can link to this kind of overall strategy and principles about how the ISI adds value, let us know. You know, there's a bunch of us sitting around the globe looking for opportunities where we can mobilize funding. But if you know those, please let us know. If you think it can add value to capacity building globally, please feel free to get in touch with myself and/or Oliver, chairing the capacity building committee. Membership inquiries, if you don't ask me about that, please send that membership inquiries to that email there. And if you want to know more about the wider ISI activities, the more of the things which I mentioned at the start of the webinar, do get in touch with Conchita. Also put forward ideas for how we make the World Statistics Congress a more impactful event. That would be great. So to go back to some of the questions then, it'd be really great to hear your views on what the ISI should prioritize to support global statistical capacity building, and also to inform that, what do you think is missing in global capacity building that maybe the ISI or other people should be doing differently to help with. Within all of that, then, what's your ideas about how we can best mobilize resources, non-financial primarily, but if we get financial, that's always helpful. So over to you, really, and it'd be really interesting to hear what you have to say. Yushi.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this really fruitful presentation. Now I have allowed everyone to be able to turn on your camera and also your unmute yourself. And now let's move on to the Q&A session. And first of all, I see Ronald Johnson. He wanted to follow up on Matthew's suggestion on the beneficial to link IOS to other part of ISI. So maybe I can just give the floor to Mr. Ronald Johnson. Ronald, please go ahead.
Thank you, Xi. Thank you, Matthew and Conchita. Yeah, so interesting all the points you raised, Matthew, and so I'm giving it, also some thought about where capacity building from the point of view of ISI can be really useful for the whole community. So just I'll give a few thoughts on that. So I think one of the things, I mean, as you rightly said in the beginning, within ISI you have IOS. So I'm looking from that perspective, right? The perspective of official statistics. But how it then can link with the other associations within ISI. So on technical issues, definitely I think there is capacity building which is very useful for statistical offices. And where the other parts of ISI could also help on doing that. Other topics would be the more upcoming and new topics, and one of the things, and you mentioned it, which I'm personally pretty interested in, is linking it up more with data science. How can we do that? In that regard, I also think it would be really good to get more young statisticians involved, get them also involved in the capacity building itself, and associate with that. I think getting that stream working with an ISI would be really good. So doing something special in Ottawa for young statisticians, I would really recommend that. Would be really willing to help with that. We currently have been working with the UN Youth Group at the UN with hackathons and things like that, and I think that's something that maybe we can follow up on. And then one thing I think where ISI would, in terms of coordination, would be less suited is those topics where within the official statistical community there are expert group working on new recommendation and stuff like that. So there, I think those are topics which better be left to those groups who are working on that. Because yes, I know that within ISI or within IAOS there are many former official statisticians, but they might not be following the latest kind of recommendations that are being done. So I just wanted to also add that to it. I think there's a lot of scope where ISI can help, and so very much on the technical issues and on the new topics. And I mentioned one with data science, but there are other ones also out there. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your information. And I'm not sure if Matthew, if you want to do some reacts, or I can pass the floor to another attendees. Okay, perfect. Okay, so let me see from the chat. So I see it's Jessica inquiring about the how to do the engagement, and I see Conchita already answered that through the chat. And so Jessica, you can feel free to email them. I think the email address has been put in the presentation, and I will ensure to share the presentation and the recording on the Global Network and also our webpage after the webinar. And I also see there's a hands up, Mr. Nasib Kalibu. Please unmute yourself and maybe introduce yourself and ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Nasib Kalevu. I'm the data officer at the UN Resident Coordinator's Office, Kampala, Uganda. And I actually welcome the idea where you mentioned that you are going to give opportunity to the young statistician and emerging statisticians. That's a great opportunity to give room and to give space for those people. Now, my question or my comment, I'm a data officer and I report on the cooperation framework and implementation of the SDGs in Uganda, but I cannot comfortably identify myself as a statistician. I would prefer identifying myself as an economist or a monitoring and evaluation specialist. And so in my position across the different countries within the UN reform, there are many colleagues in that category who were the monitoring and evaluation officers, but were recruited as data officers in many countries. Recently, we've been at the Statistical Commission for Africa in Addis, and many of them identify that. And our role requires more to work more on the statistics and data for the SDGs. So I'm looking at how best the ISI can come up with the tailored support and capacity building for such a group or such an audience who are not purely statisticians. Many of them have a different background in economics and monitoring and evaluation, but are doing more of statistical work. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And I'm not sure if Matthew or any colleagues from ISI want to answer this question.
Yeah, I don't mind commenting, but just a quick response to Ronald first is that, yeah, that's a really helpful steer. I think the important thing to underline here is that when we talk about mobilizing resources, of course, the first thing to do is to prioritize. And I think that's essential, that what we need to do is think, well, okay, the ISI could do a lot of things actually, and actually the committee's already presented quite a lot of things which could be done, and we have to really think about what's going to add the most value. And actually, I think in the next year or so, we could try some things, and then I think work with members to kind of think, well, okay, doing that is really helpful, doing that isn't really helpful, and we have to kind of experiment with this, because the ISI has not really been that kind of strategic and I think proactive in the capacity building in the past, and we really want to move into a space where we can really help, because we've got these new challenges and really big challenges, and the same kind of resource level. So we want the ISI to step up, but we wanted to do it in the right way and focus on priorities. And a really good point from Nadeem there, that I think my career experience has been in official statistics and in international development, and that phrase international development might not be familiar to a lot of colleagues in the room and a lot of official statisticians. And there are, in that world of international development, which is kind of, it's sometimes focused on capacity building and official statistics, but is often more kind of micro project based, or doesn't the funding for this goes through a different route. There are people in that industry, it's an industry, it's worth billions of dollars. There are people in the industry who are economists, who are M&E, monitoring and evaluation experts. There are data innovators, there are data scientists who are doing highly relevant stuff to what official statisticians want to know and want to do. And we need to find a way of tapping into those kind of things. And I think that the way the ISI at least strategizes about capacity building can at least signpost official statisticians to say, hey guys, there's another network of professionals out there which you're not talking to, and vice versa, because they don't kind of talk either way either. So I think that's a really good strategic priority to focus on.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you for your reacts and also your answer on this question. And I don't see any other question being posted on the chat. However, I actually have one quick question from our registration form, which asked by Ms. Jenna Tuffy from Denmark. And I also see, Jenna, you're here in the webinar, so I'm not sure if you want to unmute yourself and ask the question, or I can also have you to ask the question. Maybe I see Jenna, but I think maybe she didn't unmute, so I can just ask the question. And I believe some of the point has been covered during the presentation, because I believe the presentation is pretty fruitful. So basically the question is, how can statistician and the statistical science better support and share their expertise to provide statistics to make the world better? And what is the role of ISI and its impact on ongoing capacity building initiatives in optimizing the global statistical system and in relation to national statistics? So I'm not sure if Mr. Matthew want to answer this question, or any colleagues from ISI want to jump in. So
I think Conchita's had to leave the room, but okay. I'm happy to talk about that. Hopefully, today's presentation has kind of helped with that. But I think that it's the question that we haven't quite answered yet, actually, and I think we're trying to answer that, because I think it's important to do so. So I think it's a good question to end on, if you like, as well. I think it's a really important point. It is about networks, but the questions are about how do we best keep those networks alive. I think one of the difficult things that I've seen in official statistics over the years, and we're getting a lot better at it, but it's our introversy. We're all, we're not necessarily introverts as human beings, but some of us are. But I think culturally we haven't been as extroverted as we need to be now. And an easy place to land actually for official statisticians is with those other professionals outside of official statistics, so your academics, your researchers. And I think that we do very well I think to make sure, I think the iOS at least potentially has a more joined up program with those other institutions, and I think even in the ISI, there's lots of moving parts in the ISI, and they don't necessarily talk to each other. When I started on this committee, I got in touch with everybody working on every committee to understand what they're doing. I didn't get a response from some of them, and some of them didn't know about the other parts. And I think that even in the ISI, people are probably too introverted, maybe because they're statisticians. So it kind of culturally, I think we need to kind of change the culture a little bit. And ISI, as a professional organisation, needs to help statisticians do that. And I think it's really important that we get more younger junior people involved who have this energy, who are now being trained in different ways of thinking as they come out of university, and reality is hitting them hard on the ground, whereas a lot of the senior statisticians are actually not stuck in the old ways, but sticking to them a little bit. So I think empowering the youth and thinking about cultural change as a statistical profession, I think, will be a really important part of making any of this work.
Thank you so much for this great answer. And I see Conchita, do you want to say something and maybe elaborate a little bit more?
Well, not elaborate, but I think because we're almost at the end, I think, of this session, I think it was interesting to hear some questions and some suggestions as well. And I would like to invite everybody who has been listening and maybe thinks, oh, I do have some ideas, but I didn't have the opportunity to really react, to send us, Matthew and me, send us an email with your ideas. And we are really happy to talk with you, share your thoughts, see what's possible. And if you are in some way interested in engaging, please reach out. So that's a sort of final remark maybe, but we're very happy. We're right now in the process of thinking about the possibilities and what we're going to do. We're making the strategic plan right at the moment. We're talking with a lot of organizations. We still have a lot of talks to do. So I think this is really the moment where we can sort of still form what we're doing.
Thank you so much, Conchita. Yes, and I really appreciate this like closing remark. And I think also I invite everyone to keep the conversation going, and because I will post the presentation and the recording on the global network of statisticians and data officers and the statistician. So if you have any suggestions or good idea, as Conchita just mentioned, you are feel free to post it there. And I'm sure Matthew is also a member of the global network, and he will be also in the conversation with you after the webinar. So I don't see any further questions or comments in the chat. So I guess we can conclude our today's webinar. But before we close our webinar, I just want to invite everyone to unmute yourself and also open your camera to give a round of applause to our great presenters, Mr. Matthew and Conchita, for their presentation. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.